Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Director and writer Pat Collins' latest feature film, That They May Face, The Rising Sun, set in the 1970s in rural Ireland, just before communication revolution vastly changed the dynamic of this small, close-knit community. It's a story about Joe and Kate and so much more. It is a beautiful film, not only to look at, but the characters, the people, the interaction. Life happens throughout this film and unfolds beautifully. So, Mike, my honor to welcome to the program the director and co-writer, Pat Collins.
Thanks very much, Mike.
There's so much here to recommend. I know it's based on John McGahern,
John McGahern, yeah.
his novel. How did you come upon that, and what sort of inspired you to move forward on it?
Yeah, I mean, he wrote the book in 2002, and I started to make a documentary about him in 2004 and made it over 2004, 2005. And it was broadcast on Irish television in 2005. And then he was like, he's a novelist and short story writer. He had written maybe 5 novels, 3 books of short stories. But I think That They May Face the Rising Sun was my favorite of his novels. And I didn't think at the time, because I was a documentary maker, I didn't really think of doing drama at the time. But I always had it in the back of my mind that if I was to make any feature film from his work, it would be that novel. And he passed away in 2006, and it wasn't until about 2015 that I actually set about making it. So it was a long gestation, and we started Eamon Little and myself. We started working on the script in 2016. So and it was 2023 when it came out
Yeah.
first. So it's been a long road.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think when you're making these kind of films, it's not unusual to have 8 years, 9 years, 10 years in kind of slow development.
In some ways, your journey is in at least in the sense of the zeitgeist of the story. The fact that it was a longer journey to get this from conception to the screen kind of mirrors the ethos of this particular community, that everything it's slower and it takes a little bit longer for a lot of things to happen, but at the
Yeah.
same time it's also lasting.
Yeah, I mean, I think the novel was very, very true to life in Ireland at that time. And we try to do the same thing with the book. It's probably very close in some ways to the kind of the Ireland that I grew up in myself, before the small farmer was kind of, I suppose, elbowed out of existence, really, in Ireland and all of Western Europe. I mean, it was a time where there was kind of, small farms, people, less mechanization, much more kind of biodiversity, that kind of, all of that was there naturally almost. It wasn't a self-conscious thing. But it was, but I think one of the kind of, I suppose, if there was a message in the film and it's only really coming out afterwards, is that whole thing about maybe paying attention to your neighbors, and even if you don't necessarily agree with them, it's kind of spending time with them, caring for them, listening to them, getting on with them, even if you don't agree with them necessarily, which is a kind of a good lesson for us all in this day and age, where technology is actually trying to drive us apart, where our day-to-day kind of experiences are usually positive. But if you're looking at social media, or you're looking at media or the news or anything, you feel everything is falling apart. But mostly people's experiences are kind of positive, I think, at
Yeah.
local level.
And there's a couple of things. So is that really kind of what drew you to want to make the film? Was that sense or
Yeah, I mean, I think it was paying homage to the people that were there in the countryside at that time. And again, it's a universal thing. It's very local. The
yeah,
characters are very true to Irish characters. But I think that they would equally be true in Scandinavia or Italy, or probably parts of America as well, where communities kind of were I suppose they were often overlooked they were often kind of seen as being kind of backward,
Yeah.
where in fact they were actually, they had been, they were coming at, they were at the end of hundreds and thousands of years of actually
Yeah.
people finding a way to live with close proximity to nature without actually again being subconscious of it. Just because of necessity, they needed to make a living. Or not even make a living, they needed to survive, really, And we might all be there again. We don't.
Well, and that's what I was struck by watching it, is watching these very tried and true ways of making things work. Going is one example is the shed that is being built, and then we watch the neighbor come in and slowly help put that
Yeah,
together. But throughout
yeah,
the film, there's references to this, what you're describing is that things may not happen in 2 weeks. They may happen over 2 years or longer before. But again, going back to what I said earlier, the relationships are also through thick and thin lasting. There's something so deeply rooted in their relationships. And as I said, sometimes good, sometimes not so good as the reasons why they feel their way. But
yeah.
yeah, my gosh, it just I think the film really resonated with me. It just really,
Good to hear.
I
Yeah,
really wanted to spend time with all of them, you know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that we set out to do. I think in the beginning was, to film across the spring and into summer, then film again in winter to kind of feel the passing seasons. And I think in my original proposal even was it would be kind of, to make the audience feel like that they're actually there, that they're in the room, that they're in that place and that they're experiencing. It's almost like that they're kind of become familiar, and it's a kind of a deepening as it goes on, that they become familiar with the geography of the place and become familiar with the characters, and I do think it's kind of immersive, and I think it does, by the end of it, I think it does kind of, you find that you have kind of got entered into a world and that you're out of it again. But I think I think all those kind of things like intimacy is kind of the characters of that kind of knowledge and love that you have through that kind of intimacy, I think, of the characters. And that's not always positive, you know what I mean? It can be, these small places can be very intrusive,
Yeah.
especially for the individual who might be kind of have a kind of a temperament that mightn't be suited to it. But that, it might seem like that the people are too nosy or they're too interfering, or, it's not just all romantic either. There's obviously downsides to this. And it's true still of Irish culture. I think it's when, in a way, the funeral is kind of one of the high points of the culture, which is kind of an odd thing to say, maybe, but it's actually it's when the community now, in even in the present day, it like really comes to the fore, and people just drop everything. They drop work. They take days off work to help the family go through the process of grieving, and very often you'll have like thousands of people at a funeral, and people traveling hundreds of miles to actually sympathize with the family of the person who's passed away. And they're kind of still very intense experiences. But it's when the community come out and they're at its strongest now. But I think that would have been there 30 years ago. It would have been there in the harvesting, the community coming out together. And I know people do romanticize it, but it actually came from a kind of a need. You needed to help your neighbor because actually you needed your neighbor's help. And it was, we could romanticize it, but it did come out, and neighbors knew that they had to get on or they wouldn't survive. So there was really complicated, unsaid ways of dealing with each other that that everybody knew those codes and manners, but that didn't mean people didn't fall out like they did. There was across all these kind of peasant societies, there was really savage, vicious falling outs as well, as well as helping.
We see it in the film. We do. We definitely do. Just want to remind our listeners, we're speaking with director and co-writer of the film, that they may face the rising sun, and that would be Pat Collins. And there are a couple of things that come to mind. There are those sort of stratas of the society where you could see. There's one particular character who's sort of been shunned his whole life, or been cast in a lower level, if you will. You know, I'm telling you, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that I want to make sure I'm
the
getting that
character
correct.
Bill, yeah,
Yeah, Patrick. And also, the casting of this had to be absolutely the highest on your list of things to get this right. I thought Barry Ward and Anna, is it Baderky?
yeah, Dirk, yeah,
Baderk, okay, and then Lalore Roddy, Ruth
Laura Roddy,
McCabe,
yeah.
yeah, Ruth McCabe and Sean McClinney are all it's just such a well acted film. It's really spectacular in that regard as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I mean the casting process was, we brought in maybe 10 actors that do a read through of the script, and 2 weeks later we might do another reading again with some actors brought back, some actors not, and new actors brought in, and that's how we kind of that's how we got the cast together. But Lala Roddy, I hadn't ever worked with before, and the producer Brendan Byrne recommended him highly, and when I met him. He'd such a kind of feeling for the character, so protective of the character as well, and kind of kind of really kind of uh, was kind of had a great insight into the character, I think, and great love for the character, and the characterization is in the book, is in the novel, and it's also kind of then where I suppose that helps bring it into the film. And when the characterization is so good, it's half the battle is already won. And he was such a terrific actor, and in some ways, I think he's bigger in the film than he might even have been in the script, because he's just he's kind of channeling an energy kind of that's
Yeah, yeah,
not every actor has, or not every character has. I mean, there was a character in the novel who it was based on somebody kind of in real life, and who John and Madeline, they lived on a farm in Leitrim, and when they wrote the novel, some of the characters I'd say are drawn out of real life, and
yeah.
but there was a character who was a tradesman, a carpenter, and every week he used to come to their house and perform parts and read pages from a novel, perform poetry or for plays. And I think John had kind of based the character on that. And there was lots of these people all over, everywhere, every country really, who had kind of artistic leanings or high intelligence, but just had no avenue or no outlet for it. They might be tradesmen, but that didn't mean that they weren't, that their inner mind was working
Yeah.
on the kind of I think it's often thought that that people's appreciation for art and culture and things like that is a kind of an elite thing. But I would actually argue that everybody has an artistic leaning, really. That everyone has potential to. It's not even, maybe artistic isn't the right word. I suppose it's kind of creativity,
Great.
really.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Well, I mean, it's what makes us human, is
yeah,
to be able to express ourselves with, and however that might be. And it could
yeah,
be the written word, it could be painting, it could be a lot of different things. Carpentry is an
yeah.
art, you know.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah. Or it could be, I mean, it could be singing. Like, who doesn't have an appreciation for singing, or, for music?
yeah,
Practically everybody does. So, I mean, I think we're wired for it, I think. And that character, Patrick, has that kind of performance element to it. He's almost kind of living an artistic life, though he's not an artist as such, you know what I mean? He's I suppose he's there's an element of performance. I mean, we did think of that kitchen, of Joe and Kate's kitchen, as being almost like a stage
yeah,
where people entered, exited again, and they came in, and they kind of, there was a kind of a small, everybody had a performance of a kind, and it's very tricky material in that way, because it's very easy then to go into kind of something that's too theatrical
yeah.
almost. You know what I mean? But you're playing with theatricality, but you're hoping that you're keeping on the right side of it,
Well, for
Uh,
me, and I'm gonna maybe I'm stretching this a little further than it should be stretched, but I thought that Joe and Kate were kind of, if this was a band, if this was a jazz ensemble, they'd be the drummer and bass player and allowing people to come in and solo on saxophone or piano or whatever it might be. I felt like they provided the environment for them to be able, their characters, to allow these people to come in and do what they do so well in the film.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. I mean, because I was only thinking about that last week about bass solos. It's almost like, it's a lovely when you hear a bass solo
Yeah.
in jazz, it's almost not there. It's so subtle. The solo is so subtle compared to, say, saxophone solo or piano solo. But it's always lovely then when the crowd, clap the bass soloist as well. And I actually do think, especially with Barry Ward, the character of Joe, some people might think that he's doing very little, but he's doing a huge amount, and as well that they're reflecting all the other characters, and
Right.
they're kind
Well,
of they're allowing characters express themselves.
yeah, well, Joe was always able to bring people together and kind of smooth off the rough edges of their whatever the situation was, and
Yeah,
give them an opportunity to do something maybe a little different and or just kind of be more connected to somebody. Maybe they didn't care for it. There were a lot of things that he did to facilitate these relationships in the film.
exactly. I mean, he is very attentive and listening all the time. And but I think it's a human kind of it's good manners, but it's also kind of like it may be. I mean, I don't really ever think of it as his profession as a kind of a novelist, really, because almost that would be too cynical in a way that he's using them for material. I never get that impression from the book or from the film, and but I think that he is very much a kind of aware of the damage you can do by saying too much, or the kind of the how you can help people by just listening,
He's
and
a
kind of
thoughtful man. He's a thoughtful man, and so is Kate. They're both thoughtful
yeah,
people, and they've made a decision. They want to live there, and I'm not going to give anything more away, but there's a kind of a back and forth between them about
yeah,
how long they want to stay there
yeah,
and live. And I just there again, there's just so much to recommend. It looks beautiful. I don't think we have enough time to get into this too deeply, but your documentary background, I feel like provided a foundation for a lot of the ways in which you shot the film. I don't know exactly how that played out, but it feels I mean, I often ask documentary filmmakers who make a narrative film,
yeah.
what's that? I mean, you're telling a story. Everyone's telling a story, but how does that kind of carry over into your narrative work?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think with cinema, or just my own personal viewpoint is that sometimes the narrative of a film takes over, and I kind of don't want to ever start from that point. It's kind of once you start telling a story or start telling a narrative, you have to be faithful to the narrative.
Yeah.
So then I kind of prefer not to have our very very faint narrative, so that you can still be true to the time passing, to the seasons passing, to nature, and to slowing the pace down when you need to, as opposed to trying to quicken it up so that the narrative, sometimes it feels like people are kind of encouraging you to just get to the end almost as quickly as possible. And you think, but why do you like? It's a bit like the shed, really. Is that maybe the building of the shed is the good thing.
Yeah.
Um, but there is no point in rushing it.
Yeah.
So I prefer to kind of take the strong narrative out and let it all work together, really, as a kind of mosaic, I suppose,
Yeah.
rather than
And
one.
as often the case, your sound design is beautiful. In a good narrative film, it's subtle, understated, but it really helps reinforce the notion of what you're talking about, this kind of connection to nature in the film.
Yeah, I mean, it's the it's often forgotten. Sometimes it's put in too much, and in an unnatural way. But as soon as we step out the door of our houses, it doesn't actually matter whether it's a city or a town or a countryside. You hear bird song, and you hear
Yeah.
nature, you hear the wind.
Yeah.
So, and it's just in film very often it's ignored for some strange reason, I
Yeah.
think. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe it's because it's actually quite powerful when you pay attention to it, that a lot of films can't actually take nature because it's actually either too obstructive, or you kind of go, I'd like to hear more of that. But
Yeah.
so that it's actually it's an important component for me in particular, even for documentaries, is that you can kind of learn to hear the sound of the place as well. It's kind of half the story in some ways.
Well, thank you. I mean, thank you for the film That They May Face the Rising Sun. It's beautiful, beautiful
Catchy
film.
title.
Yeah, well, that's part of it's the book. I mean, and also as co-writer as well as director Pat Collins, and if you're looking for this film, looking for it wherever it might show up, whether it's on a platform or not later on, when it will be. By the way, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Congratulations on kind of the recognition of your work here. Pat Collins, thank you so very much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Mike, listen, good talking to you.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.